Hello and welcome to the Business Spotlight series. I'm Sean Schoenmakers, the owner of ActionCOACH Dallas, where we are helping business owners build and grow their businesses to really ultimately improve their lives. So today we've got Paul Adams with us. How you doing, Paul?
Good morning. Good to see you, Sean.
Yes. So appreciate you being on. We have Paul with us. He's the owner of Columbia Home Services, and so he's going to tell us all the ins and outs of that business and the things that they see on a day-to-day basis and just give us some interesting stories and insights and so forth. So we're happy to have you on, Paul. And so if this is your first time in the audience, if this is your first time on the channel or watching these videos, make sure you like and subscribe, do all those things to get the notifications so that when we drop more of these valuable interviews into the channel, you can see all of them and hopefully get all the benefits. So without further ado, Paul, could you introduce us to your company and tell us what problems do you solve?
Sure. Thanks, Sean, for having me. My name is Paul Adams, and as Sean said, I'm the founder and CEO of Columbia Home Services. I'd like to think that we solve problems for residential customers that have essential service needs for HVAC, plumbing, and electrical. And we do a little bit of light commercial, but our majority of our customer base is residential. So I think there's always lights to turn on, there's houses to cool, and toilets to flush.
Plenty of those, maybe too many sometimes. Yes. So good. And so tell us how and why did you start this company?
I've spent the better part of my career in home services, having started on the electrical side and spent a great deal of time in plumbing and HVAC. Sort of developed a thesis over the years and went to the market to raise some capital and wanted to create an operating company that was focused on essential services, but executed by bringing in legacy type companies in more or less secondary markets where essential services are not as prevalent. Um, and we've been at it now for about 2 years, and we've successfully brought on 12 partners over the course of that 2 years. So we're really excited that our buy and build strategy has kind of come to fruition.
So maybe just clarify a little bit what you mean by partners. Does that mean you acquired them? They're now equity partners? How does that work?
I think probably one of the difference makers as far as we're concerned is I don't use the term partner lightly. You
Yep.
you can acquire a business and you can sell a business, but when you partner with legacy brands, you have to be very conscientious that you're dealing with legacy entrepreneurs. And we're a bit more selective on who we choose as our partners. And more often than not, when people sell their company, they move on to the next phase of their life, which usually doesn't involve operating the business that they have for built over the course of several years. In our situation, we look at these legacy businesses and the owners, and we want them to join our platform and continue to run the business. But the analogy I always use is that we don't want to change culture. We don't want to change how they face their customers, but what we want to do is we want to fuel their tank. We want them to realize growth and more valuation in the legacy that they've built. So that term partner means that when we acquire their company, they're rolling equity in our platform, which they are then pari passu with the rest of the investors, which creates really significant alignment.
Yeah, true. Yeah, of course I asked because a lot of people use, I mean, there's a lot of types of partners out in the world, right? So and even in different companies, someone being a partner could be as little as like a 1% ownership. So it's always just curious to kind of hear what people mean by the partner scenario. And our franchise, they call us franchise partners, right? I mean, and I guess we're kind of like partners, but probably not in the way you're talking about. So yeah, appreciate you explaining that in more detail. And then you mentioned just for again for clarity, not just for maybe for the audience too. Like said essential home services. So is that HVAC, plumbing, electrical, like, is it all of the trades, so to speak, or how, what it consists? What in totality, I guess, do you guys do?
Yeah, good question, and I'll clarify. Namely, it is residential replacement and service for plumbing, electrical, and HVAC.
Okay.
And depending on the market, some of our partners actually have what we call ancillary services. So we may engage in duct cleaning, we may do some form of blown insulation.
Okay.
Sort of post-COVID, there's been a heightened sensitivity around the quality of your air. So we sell a lot
Hmm.
of indoor air quality products like UV lighting,
Hmm.
things to sort of combat the airborne pathogens and bacteria. And I think a lot of that was driven by the fact that people moved their place of employment for the most part to their home. So they wanted to improve their air quality. They wanted to be more comfortable. So again, in the smaller markets, contractors are usually called on to do a variety of different things. And so while electrical, plumbing, and HVAC may be our core competency, in some markets we've sort of branched out to engage in other home services.
Nice. Yeah, and then so basically, to reiterate what you were saying, the partners that you've brought on, those are guys that have built a business to some degree, and then they've now partnered with you, and they have said you said they rolled in some equity, so now, but they're continuing to run it like they would have been had you not met them. I mean, maybe not exactly the same, but they're still running it basically. Is
Yeah,
that okay?
that's another difference maker with us. I think those of us that have lived in the M&A world realize that a lot of acquisitions are not successful.
Mm.
Uh, Not necessarily because the business is not successful, but the degree of change and the uncertainty that, employees, they go to dark places. And so what we do is we don't put a lot of emphasis on partnering or acquiring and sending messages to the market that it actually happened.
Yeah.
So we don't do press releases. We don't necessarily have big open town halls to announce to employees the change because we don't think it's necessary. We
Yeah.
think that if the partner has made a conscious decision to stay on the business, why disrupt what has been really, really good for many, many years? And I think the other differentiating factor is we don't invest in businesses that are broken. These
Mhm.
legacy brands are successful, they're
Yeah.
profitable, they have high retention, they have high customer ratings. And so for us, we sort of operate in the shadows and we
Yeah.
keep the gas tank full so that they can really realize the growth that they've always wanted to achieve. But sometimes they were too leveraged or didn't have enough resources or
Yeah.
weren't efficient at recruiting.
Yeah.
So we tried not to make a big to do about the change, and that
Yeah.
has positively, worked for us.
Yeah, very good. So basically, hey, what's not broken, keep doing it, right? Don't fix what's not broken, and then if there are some things like you said, maybe they're challenged on recruiting or some other part of the business, then hey, maybe you guys can supplement that or help them improve that. But all kind of more so behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And they
Yeah.
seem to, sort of gravitate to that because, entrepreneurs don't like to be told what to do. And it doesn't matter what type of business they run, entrepreneurs are wired differently. So what we try to do is we try to understand the psyche of the entrepreneur, try to cater to what it is that they need. So if it's systems or back office, operationally intensifying it or bringing on new people or introducing AI, we can do those things because often an entrepreneur that works sort of in the business doesn't isn't really afforded the opportunity to work on the business, if that makes any sense.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I like that. And so basically just focusing on the value add. Hey, where are the areas in the business we can add value? And of course, now having so many partners, someone's got probably someone has some of that competency, even if not you guys. So you can probably then mix and match, or hey, Bob talk with John, and John, maybe you can get some of the inputs from Bob on how he does XYZ. So yeah, that's awesome. I think I mentioned to you we just had a client sell his HVAC company, and his words exactly were they basically told him the company that acquired him, they were like, yeah, we don't want you to change anything. Right? Like just keep going, right? Like it's already a good business and they're pretty decent size. So one thing though, I will say one of their value adds that they got is way better pricing. They're able to, I say that, way better buying power. So, which enables them to have better pricing. But so again, I'm sure those kinds of things make you guys pretty valuable to the people you partner with. So,
I mean, I think there are opportunities with scale to improve your procurement strategy. But again, what we don't do is we don't make unilateral decisions for the former owner by selecting who they do business with,
yeah,
whether it's customer and even suppliers.
yeah,
We try to convince them that, you can achieve economies of scale by harmonizing some procurement. But
yeah,
look, be honest, if you don't have it, you can't sell it. So you have to be, or we have to be more conscientious of who we're working with so that we're always have that sort of supply for that contractor on a go forward basis, particularly in HVAC when it's the cooling season
yeah,
and they need units.
yeah. Well, I know with this client I was talking about, they have their one or two preferred um, units that they buy and install. And I mean, obviously, as you do more and more systems, you gain more and more confidence. So if you came in and said, "Hey, we're going to change that system you guys are typically buying," I mean, that could change all that could completely disrupt their business. So obviously, like you said, hey, if you want to keep running it, we don't probably not a good idea to start, like unilaterally, making decisions that's going to probably screw a lot of things up. So sounds like you guys have done this before. So
Couple
sounds
times.
good. Yeah. Um, so if I'm in the audience, because you mentioned residential, but so if I'm in the audience, how do I know if I'm a good fit for your service or product? Who do you guys primarily serve?
Well, I think in terms of who we primarily serve, it is a residential customer base. There's no particular focus on any one type of residential customer because essential services cuts across both single family dwellings, multifamily, vacation homes, you name it, we do it. I think what is the biggest differentiator is availability. Often in a market, particularly like a Dallas, if you just look at the single family home market in the four county area that makes up DFW, it's probably just shy of a $2 billion single family home market. And if there are 4,000 contractors in that four county area, there's far more demand than there are contractors.
Mhm.
So, where we are today, availability is key because the customer wants to call in, and typically with essential services, it's not a call that we receive until there's a problem.
Yeah.
Uh, a lot of customers choose not to necessarily invest in maintenance of their systems. And let's be honest, sort of average life cycle of these systems is long. So we understand why people think the way they do. But if they don't maintain those systems, then when there is a break, fix opportunity, they're picking up the phone and they're calling, and the first contractor that answers has to make sure that they don't overcommit it under to deliver. Uh,
Mhm.
so I think for us, we don't discriminate on who the customer is. We just want to make sure that we are picking up the phone and we are delivering what I call a first time fix. Because it's too expensive for us and inconvenient to the customer if we're not able to address their service problem when they call.
All right. Yeah. So folks that want to be able to, you know, call someone and get in, right? They got the issue and they need it fixed. So you guys are again with your plethora of your multiple partners probably have a lot of that
Yeah, and I
availability.
think
Or
it's less driven by price. It's
yep,
more it's more driven by need
yeah,
because when you're uncomfortable or your lights are off
Yeah.
and the washing machine's not working because there's a clogged drain, those are very serious inconveniences. And people, doesn't matter what their situation is, they're just not apt to accept it and they want it fixed. So we again need to be available and we have to have the available labor. And what we often see, particularly during the cooling season now, call it May in Texas, where
Yeah.
we just had over 100 degrees, the phone's ringing quite a bit. So we have to be pretty nimble.
Yeah. So, would you say that's what makes you guys, it sounded like you were kind of saying, hey, that's kind of one of the things that makes us unique or different from the competition is we focus on being available, get in there as fast as, having the availability with all the different partners you guys have?
Well, I
Or is it
think
something else?
I really think that, look, all contractors generally want to do the same thing, right? They want to provide or demonstrate customer first mentality. I would like to think that what we're doing is we're taking it a little bit further. When we think about calls coming in and we think about abandoned calls and we think about drop calls, in our minds, there should never be a situation where a call is not answered and that we're not communicating or reciprocating with that customer. So, what we've been looking at and sort of playing with is new AI technology where it's enabling us to be able to have a text or email exchange, or for that matter, some voiceover exchange with the customer so that the phone is answered 24/7 and that the AI technology today can actually interpret what the customer is asking, can actually reciprocate by offering a schedule or an appointment.
Yeah.
And so those types of things, I think, are kind of elevating the level of service that we envisage for our customers. So is that a competitive advantage? I think so, because a lot of contractors do what they've always done and they get what they've always got. And that's not
Mhm.
necessarily a bad way to do things or operate. But for us, and given our size, that we see a call because we are very lead dependent because in our industry we do not cold call. So
Mhm.
every incoming call is important to us. And
Yeah.
our marketing dollars are spent to bring those incoming calls.
Mhm. Yeah, and I could see where if you guys develop or you figure out ways to better utilize AI, and of course you can then spread that across the 12 partners. I mean, that's super valuable. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure I got a spam call, voicemail this morning, and I'm pretty sure when I listened to it, I was like, that doesn't sound like a person. That sounds like AI. I mean, that's just my guess, but I'm guessing that's probably what's happening these days is they're doing probably outbound with AI as well. So,
Yeah, it could be,
yeah.
but like I think the unique challenge that contractors have is that at any one time, there are multiple generations of people procuring services and products.
Hmm.
When we think about the younger generations, whether it's millennials or Gen Ys, there's a tendency to get up, get on your PC, and purchase something online at 2 a.m. In my generation, and I may be dating myself as a Gen X
Are
or
you
a,
are you not a millennial?
or a baby boomer, we want to touch it and feel it, and we want to put our hands on the product or service. So we want to talk to someone more often than not. So I think what we're trying to do is just recognize that buyer behavior is varied across these
Yeah,
generations, and that if people use social media and technology to communicate socially, we're adopting that professionally
yeah,
because we think that that's where these younger generations want to go about purchasing these types of services or obtaining a quote. And we just don't feel that we should limit the customer to 9 to 5. So
yeah,
that's why that AI technology for us
yeah.
is potentially going to change the playing field.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it'd be almost silly to ignore the vast variety of ways people like to communicate, right? I mean, some people, like you said, they have different preferences, and if you just ignore that, then you're cutting out some percentage of your market, basically. So yeah, I think it's smart to be able to use the AI like you guys are starting to try to do, sounds like. So yeah, it's good stuff. So talking about customers leads me to my next question, marketing. And so, a lot of businesses sometimes they struggle with the marketing side of things. In fact, a lot of people are like, "Oh my gosh, hate marketing." But what would you say for you guys? What's been the number one marketing strategy that's brought you the most business?
But look, we're no different than anybody else. Marketing's tough. There are people that jumped on digital in the beginning and have really reaped the benefit. There are some of us that jumped on digital a little bit later. And then as we've changed digital providers, we've learned much more about how warming up your brand as far as your digital strategy, how critical that is. We've seen the good and the bad and the ugly. I think for us, we have kind of like a twofold strategy. We have a digital strategy, which requires a different competency level. And then, of course, we have our traditional mediums where, we still engage in print and some radio and TV. And it, namely because this is how people have purchased these services throughout the years. And essential services has also been heavily referral dependent. So a lot of focus on the Yelp and Google reviews. Customers will blog about what went well during the visit, service technician, and what did not go so well.
Yeah.
So, for us, look, we haven't figured that piece out. I'll be honest with you. I think there are a lot of things out there, LSA, GMB, PPC, and there are parts of it we do well in certain markets, parts we don't do so well. And then it's really weaving in the right call to actions with your customers and the right promotions
Mm.
and using systems. So contractors are notorious for slow user adoption when it comes to technology. And we've tried very carefully to weave technology in while recognizing that user adoption is a key KPI. It's kind of like garbage in, garbage out. If you don't really take care of your system and use it, and it
Mhm.
doesn't provide, it's not a selling tool, or it doesn't help you find customer information, you just can't have a management tool, right? It's got to be something for everybody. So,
Yeah, yeah.
the field service management systems that we've invested in, we've really tried to engage in better user adoption, teach our people why it makes their jobs easier, and then use those systems to engage in marketing to our existing customer base. But I'll be honest with you, it is a little bit of a black box.
Yeah.
A lot of people say they can do things. And
Yeah.
some cases it works, some cases it doesn't.
Well, I think to some degree, if you do keep the 12, and I'm just using the 12, you mentioned the 12 partners, if they all kind of have their own, typical branding and but they're all separate, then I mean we see most businesses, I mean, we work with several law firms, for example, and each of the law firms typically have their best marketing strategy. So you would think, oh, same industry, everyone's got the same basic strategy that works, but it's like not that way. So I could see where maybe if you have 12 different partners and they each have maybe a winning strategy or whatever might be working the best for them. I mean, well, now it's harder. You got to keep track of all those, or hey, do we pump that up or move that down? But since you guys do like to keep the 12 more continuing to do what they've been doing in terms of success, right? Then hey, well, maybe we don't yeah, that. I think that makes it a harder challenge, I'd say, for you guys to figure out that marketing box. So
Yeah, look, there's pros and cons to maintain the legacy brands or
yeah,
just going with a new brand.
yeah.
But let's be honest, there are um, reasons why the legacy brand is paramount. Those brands have been handed down from generation to generation. Those stickers have been on the hot water heaters and the HVAC
Hmm.
for years. And
Yeah.
so multi generations of families use the same service providers. So, it is a challenge for us a lot of logistics, but I'm not so sure you can replace a brand. We just purchased the company in DFW that's been there for 122 years.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can put a price on that. And
Yeah.
so we'll
A lot of
accept
trust.
marketing challenges.
Yeah, a lot of trust built. Again, the business I was mentioning, the client of ours was 70 years in the family, so not 120, but 70 years is still a long time. And so, obviously, someone goes from being one brand to the next brand after 70 years. You're like, wait a minute, that's weird. So, I totally see what you're saying. What about team wise? So, lots of team out there. What's been maybe one of your bigger learnings as from an employer perspective?
Look, I think it takes a career to figure that out. In many ways. I sort of coined the term value proposition. Um, doesn't matter what job you perform on the team, what is the value proposition to being part of Columbia Home Services? I take that pretty serious. I think we're not making anything, we're providing a service. So without people, without teams of people, you really don't have a business. You have a website, a phone number, and a customer list. So, I'm very sort of frontline centric. I think the plumber, the electrician, the HVAC technician, the installer, those key administrative people in the office and customer service and dispatch that deal with the customers, that's what kind of makes our world go round. Management is management, but they should be more or less regarded as a resource and fan of their people. In today's sort of, workplace, labor is a hot commodity. Finding really good people and maintaining loyalty and, people that want to demonstrate that customer first mentality all the time, they're hard to find. And we don't, well, particularly in our industry, we don't have a lot of younger generations gravitating to the trades. So
Yeah.
when you look across the country, there is a pretty significant shortage of field people.
Mhm.
So that comes back to the value proposition. What does that mean? It's more than just an hourly wage. It is the health and welfare offering. It is the 401k, and albeit a 401k is not even your main retirement vehicle, but perhaps it's the match that the company gives,
Yeah.
uh, and all those other ancillary benefits. And so I think for me, I want people to think two or three times before they make a decision to leave, that as they're comparing where they're going to, is our value proposition greater?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good way to talk about it. We've heard people try to compare, well, the hourly rates over there versus the hourly rates over here. And I'm like, yeah, but that's a piece of the pie. I mean, it's a pretty common piece that most people will look at first. But what else, right? What's the total comp or total value? I like how the way you put that. So yeah, I like how you're focused on that. Obviously, that's going to be important to your team. So help them stick around if you guys are serious about it, like you are. So
The other thing we just did is, you can imagine, when you do 12 acquisitions over 18 months, it's what we often call organized chaos.
I mean,
So
I feel like an acquisition by itself is organized chaos. When you do 12, it's like obviously next level.
so we
So
took a chance
yeah.
and we did an employee survey. And I was pleasantly surprised at the high degree of engagement.
Hmm.
And I was also pleasantly surprised at the very low number of people that are deemed that disassociate with who they work for.
Hmm.
So, when I think of where we ended up on a 100-point scale, I was pretty excited to see that our partners have kept their cultures intact. And they all have challenges. There's always going to be a good hire or a bad hire, but I'm really pleasantly surprised. And I think with all the change going on and our partners learning us, it's pretty remarkable that they were able to, maintain or retain their people. And
Hmm.
so, like, our retention rate, or that call it 2 years, is like 85+%, which is very high for the industry
Yeah.
because we're very cyclical in terms of the building cycle and recessions and homes and being built and whatnot. And so we follow that. And often when that happens, if people have a fluctuation in hours or income, they
Yeah.
will jump ship. So to
Mm.
retain these people through a lot of change and chaos and provide service to the customers and still be happy, I'm pretty pleased.
Yeah. Well, I'd say that's probably one of your requirements to provide good service. If you got all this interchange of team, then you're probably going to have, other issues to the customers, right? So it sounds like you guys have done well, like you said, to accomplish that. Um, what would you do? So you've been in, you said 18, well, you said 12 acquisitions, 18 months, but it sounds like you said you've been in doing this for, well, this whole thing for 2 years. So over that time, if you were to restart, let's say you said, you know what, scrapping the whole thing, restarting this whole thing today, what would you do different?
I say that every time that I do this. This is the fourth time I've been involved in a buy and build strategy. Um, look, I think one of the noticeable things that I did in the beginning, which I mentioned that we don't do now, is we don't make a big to-do about the acquisition.
Yeah.
Um, However, when you do acquire companies, in theory, you have a loose federation of employers. I think the degree of integration is a big challenge and a big question as to how fast and when. So I think the thing that I would do different is I would probably do less deals as fast. I would probably slow integration down. And it's only because the adoption of the new company to change is always going to be a challenge
Mhm. Yeah.
because a lot of people have a level of comfort and it's hard to get people out of their comfort zone. But like you can be on a path to integration. You don't always have to be done.
Yes.
What you can do is you can introduce change and be smart about it. So I think as time goes on, perhaps I get a little bit better and a little bit more tolerant of not pushing as hard.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for being a bit more methodical, more communicative about why we're doing what we're doing
Mm.
versus getting it done.
Yeah.
And often when, you do a buy and build strategy, you are capitalized by private equity, and that introduces a whole other
Mhm.
set of dynamics because as we are, there is a horizon for potential change or exit. And even though we're building an operating culture and whatnot, and we're not acting as if we're going to sell, private equity does buy and sell. So you want to balance everything. And I
Mhm.
think that's the one thing I got to get better at. And I say that as I'm in the twilight of my career, being better at balance, but I'm open and honest about that. That is the one thing that I would improve
Mhm.
about my strategy or thesis and how I go about executing.
Yeah. That's good. Just personal awareness. So, I mean, look, all of us have the areas of improvement, right? And if we're not sure what they are, then we probably need to look at them a little bit more. So for sure, maybe, sounds like you might be, hey, and obviously 12 acquisitions in 18 months, you got to be having your foot on the gas to some degree. So, but like you said, maybe continuing to, you know, toggle that back a little bit to get a little better balance. That sounds like a spot for you. So
Yeah, and I think,
nice.
the listening piece, I often say sometimes people just hear you, they don't listen. Um, I think as leaders, we got to do more listening because a lot of the people that are executing on these integration components, um, they they have the throttle and they know they're closer to it than we are. And
Mhm.
so we really have to listen to them about the cadence for the change and the integration. And Often leaders just have this like, hey, we got to do it. It is what it is.
Hmm.
It's part of the, it's par for the course. But,
Yeah.
I honestly think after much time to reflect, and particularly after 2 years of just managing organized chaos, slower is better sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. So what's the next goal or milestone for you, Paul?
Retirement.
All right. When is that? Tomorrow.
I, listen, I love the industry. You can't help but think at this point in my career, like, what is really the next step? I think, I love doing what I'm doing, but there's a horizon on it, because it's the nature of private equity. And us entrepreneurs, we accept that. So, when you're out raising capital and you have this thesis, you don't even think about that. And then if you're fortunate enough, like I was, to get it up off the ground and realize it, and then as you start to step away and let the younger generations and the smarter people kind of really bring it to fruition, you can't help but think, what's next for me? Look, I'm not going to retire 100%,
Yeah.
but I'll be honest with you, slowing down a little bit, kind of like what I just said, is probably not a
Yeah.
bad idea. But I like, or envisage myself just sort of giving back a bit more. There's been a lot of people in my career as an entrepreneur that, have reminded me to pay it forward. So, entrepreneurs don't survive unless somebody helped them, because
Yeah.
somebody usually had the funds or the smarts to back you.
Yeah.
And we're a different breed. So we're hard to manage. So,
Yeah.
so, you know,
Yeah.
um,
I lead a 50 plus person networking group on Thursdays, and it's mostly business owners. And yeah, I'm always like, yeah, it's hard to what do I say, to corral you cats. I mean, it's like freaking cats all over the place, these business owners. So but
that's putting it mildly.
yeah, exactly. So definitely interesting breed. So second to last question. If someone's interested, how can people learn more about you or your business, your company, Paul? How can they get in contact?
Yeah, again, I think we're not as formal with our process. And as just one of the people on the team, I encourage people that are thinking about selling to realize you may not be ready to sell, but like, I want to be involved and have that discussion with you if I'm afforded the opportunity. So I always encourage people that if they do own an essential services business, and they're interested in just exploring the idea. I think, having been a contractor, I understand the shoes that they're in, and I think I would encourage them to come to me directly.
Cool. And how would they do that?
Well, probably the old-fashioned way: 561-213-2061.
Nice. You are of the older generation. That's a phone call if people don't recognize what those seven digits are. So yeah, good stuff. And any last question, any special offers you might want to have for any of the listeners? And maybe that
Oh,
was
wow. Listen, I'd just like to think that here in the DFW marketplace, if you call the AC Hero or you call Dallas Plumbing, make sure you drop my name, and we'll make sure that we give you a special promotion.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Well, Paul, thanks a bunch for your candidness and information and all the details. And thanks for joining us today and investing some time with us. A bit of an opportunity to give back, in my opinion. So, and thanks to the audience for watching. Hopefully, you got some good tidbits out of Paul. And if not, feel free to call him. He may or may not answer, but I think you got his number. So, anyway, appreciate you being with us, Paul. And we're gonna wrap up.
Thank you, Sean, for the opportunity.
Thanks a bunch. Bye bye.